Hi, my name is Marc Mondor. I'm an architect. I'm principal with Evolve Environment Architecture. We're a green building and sustainability consulting design firm headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When we talk about green building or sustainability in architecture, we're talking about a number of different things, but they all have to do with minimizing the impact of the building in design and construction for the materials as well as the site, as well as the resources that are used, notably energy and water. And we're also talking about the indoor health of the occupants and users of the building, making sure that spaces are what we call productive and healthy. So a number of different rating systems exist in order to help facilitate this, depending on what the goals of the particular project are. There is the LEED certification, which we've talked about a little bit, and there is a more stringent certification called the Living Building Challenge. And it's so stringent that even though it's been around for about 15 years, there are about 24 certified projects around the world, but we're at one of them right now. The Living Building Challenge looks at the impact of a building as well as the indoor environmental health, as well as lessening impacts on the environment in the design and construction of the project. So when we're looking at what a living building is, which is what they're called once they're certified, we're looking at a building that actually creates more energy than it uses. If you think about that, most anything we do uses energy. Here's a building that actually is able to create more energy than it uses. With regards to water, the water coming out of the building is cleaner than the water going in. That takes a lot of energy in planning, as well as the interior environment, where you have materials that are able to be non-toxic and healthy. And that helps with also the ability to ventilate, open windows, bringing the outside in, having certain elements that make us productive and healthier. So the Living Building Challenge really got its start in about 2006, and it's taken a little while for the concept to catch on because it is so exacting. But what we have here at Phipps Center for Sustainable Landscapes is one of the very first certified living buildings. So from this perspective, you get a really good sense of how the building was designed. You have this squarish portion on the left, that's the office space. So you have 2 levels of offices, and the building's not too wide so that you're always near a window, and you can open the window, and if you open it on both sides, then the air comes through. That creates something called ventilation autonomy, where you don't need mechanical ventilation because you're able to let nature do its thing. In fact, those windows are computerized so that they open at the right times and close at the right times, so that you're not accidentally leaving windows open in the middle of winter or when it's super humid. So the design of it has such that the ventilation comes through as well as the daylighting. You see on the left-hand side facing south what are called sunshades. That lets in the low winter sun that you do want, and it blocks the high summer sun that you don't want. It's a very passive approach. This is something that our ancestors did centuries ago. Well, here we are doing it here because it's free energy, and of course you're able to see out clearly. So at window height, where you're sitting or standing, you always have a clear vision out because the ability to see outwards is good for productivity, it's good for morale. So there's a lot going on in this office design here. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side is what we call the vertical element that conveys people from the ground floor to the 3rd floor. So you actually have these 2 elements together, where you have people actually able to walk up and down the steps or take the elevator if they need to. But then at the very top, you have this rooftop garden. So you have a green roof. It's cover of most of the roof, but it provides habitat for butterflies and insects and species like that, while at the same time keeping the building cooler because it's able to absorb solar energy, and at the same time lessening the impact on stormwater infrastructure because a lot of stormwater is able to be captured by the green roof also. So the entire building itself works as a system. So it's good for the people inside, it's good for the people visiting. You have a sense for how the energy efficiency works because the walls are insulated. You have a sense for the healthiness of the interiors because you have low toxic, low VOC materials, and you have the ability to open or close windows as you see fit. So it makes what's called a productive environment. So altogether, this building works in concert with the overall site. What you have this way is stormwater that comes down and gets captured in the stormwater wetlands, while at the same time the building treats its own sewage. Believe it or not, When you flush the toilets, that water actually gets treated on site, and after a certain period with anaerobic digestion, it then gets released and then it goes to feed the plants. So it actually creates a cycle. So that's part of sustainability when we talk about green building, is the ability to close loops and work with cycles, whether it's the sun rising or setting, whether it's the heat or cold of the seasons, or whether it's the idea that a waste product becomes a nutrient for some other cycle. All of these things work in harmony with nature. So that's the beauty of a building like this, that was really able to take those concepts and make them into a workable building that's actually become a national destination. People come to Pittsburgh from all around the country, even around the world, to see this building and the Phipps campus. That's how much is going on here.
Hi, I'm Richard Piacentini, President and CEO for Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens, and welcome to Phipps. We're standing here on the lower campus of the conservatory, and behind me you see the Center for Sustainable Landscapes. This is a building that we're really quite proud of. It's a building that the idea for it actually was generated many years ago when we realized that we needed to create a new education research administration building. And I happened to be at the Green Building Conference in Denver in November of 2006 when Jason McLennan announced the Living Building Challenge. And I was at that conference and got very excited about this idea of creating a building that's really incorporates itself well into nature, that cares about humans, that cares about the environment, that cares about place. When we created this building, nobody had ever built a Living Building Challenge building before. So we were really kind of cautious when we were moving into this idea of creating this kind of building. So we also decided to pursue LEED Platinum as certification as well. And because we're a botanical garden, we're very excited about this idea of really looking at how can we create landscapes that are good for people and the planet as well. So for us, this building represents what good looks like. It really is, I think, a really good representation of how do you create a building that's healthy for people and healthy for the planet. Right after we opened the Center for Sustainable Landscapes, we realized that we needed to provide additional classroom space for our growing education programs for children. So we started to look around to try to figure out what does a good design for a children's classroom look like. And we were surprised when we learned that in this country, when many school districts need additional classroom space, they buy a portable. This is a really bad idea. Portables are notorious for off-gassing a lot of chemicals, some of which are basically toxic. They also provide places that have very little natural light and very little natural ventilation. We wanted to do better. So we decided to build a modular classroom that would be designed to meet the Living Building Challenge. One that would be free from toxic chemicals, provide natural daylight, provide natural ventilation, and in essence be a healthy place for our kids to have their programming. We also decided that this would be a great opportunity not only to build a healthy place for children here at Phipps, but to be able to start a conversation in our community is what is a good place for children. Children are the most vulnerable members of society, and we tend to put them in some of the worst places. We want to demonstrate what a good place looks like for children. Behind me you see the Exhibit Staging Center. Now, this building was originally a public works building that was built in the 1960s. It was a cinder block building with no windows. It really wasn't a very great place. So when we first decided that we needed to create a new maintenance facility, our first thought was, well, let's tear it down and build something new. But then we started to say to ourselves, the greenest building is one that already exists. What if we could take this building and turn it into one of the greenest buildings in the world? It'd be a great demonstration of what can be done with some of these old, ugly buildings that we have from many generations ago, that they can become green buildings. We then said, okay, this is going to be a building for maintenance people. What kind of buildings do maintenance people usually get? Well, usually they get buildings that are not very healthy spaces or very nice spaces. So we said, okay, what if we could make this building be a WELL Platinum certified building and show people that you could take an ugly old cinder block building and not only turn it into one of the greenest buildings in the world, but also one of the healthiest buildings for people as well. So for this building, we're pursuing the Living Building Challenge, LEED Platinum, and WELL Platinum certification. At Phipps, we're all about connecting people to nature, which is something that we've been doing since 1893. But now with the addition of these new buildings, we're demonstrating that there's a great opportunity to demonstrate how we can live in harmony with nature, and something that we really try to show, this is what good looks like when we live in harmony with the natural world.
Here we are inside of the Center for Sustainable Landscapes. And right at this point, you get to see how the building is made. It's really two pieces that come together. You've got the office area there, and then here you have the stairs and the elevator and the restrooms and the service spaces. So the office area here is not too wide, and it has a green roof on top, which you can see. That's populated with native drought-tolerant species that are made to thrive in the abundant rainfall of over 40 inches of rain that we get here every year. You can also see beyond the green roof, which is occupiable, so people go up there to get a breath or get a break and have a nice view over the city. We also have a vantage point by which we can see the other two living buildings. So there's just over 24 certified living buildings around the world. 3 of them are right here at Phipps. So we get a nice view over the landscape, the other living buildings, the green roof, and the cityscape. The other thing to notice here is that what I'm standing on right now is concrete. Concrete is a very good material for a living building because it absorbs heat and keeps it, as well as taking the time to lag. So it is actually a more comfortable material because it's able to capture the energy that we want or dissipate the energy that we don't want. Other things to notice are the windows. Very clear, you can see out, but up above are actual actuators that will open and close the windows depending on the conditions. So there's a computer that will determine when it makes sense to have them open and when we don't want to have them open in order to have air flowing through. Days are hot, they're humid, they're cold, they're dry, whatever the situation, the fresh air comes in order to best ventilate the space. The other thing we have here in the stairs is an atrium that has a skylight at the very top. Just the way a chimney would work, when you open up the top of it, the hot air rises up outside of it and it draws the cool air in. So it increases the ventilation while bringing fresh air in, while getting rid of the hot, moist air that we don't want. So all of these things here work together. When we're looking at the existing campus, we also have the production greenhouse here. This was built about 10, 15 years ago. The production greenhouse, like you would imagine, is a necessity for a botanical garden. But one of the amazing things about it is that the gable of the roof actually opens up in the summertime. So if you've ever been in a greenhouse that's too hot, this is how it gets rid of it. It actually opens right up to the elements. Or even right now, while it's raining, the rain can actually go right in if that's what you want in order to best improve the production. The production greenhouse also has soil tubes underneath, bringing fresh air in. By the time that the air travels underneath and comes up, it's actually perfectly breathable because it's perfectly comfortable at that particular temperature. So when you add this all up, what you have here at Phipps is a community and an organization that really understands how to build lightly, how to use natural cycles for benefit, how to build spaces that are healthy and inviting for people, and how to educate. Everywhere you see, you have interpretation and communications and signage and graphics that explain everything that's going on. It's a wonderful place to visit. I recommend it. So now we are at the Frick Environmental Center over in Frick Park in the east end of Pittsburgh. This building is also a living building, namely that it uses less energy than it creates. The water coming out is cleaner than the water going in. The stormwater is all handled on site. The materials that are inside are all healthy, non-toxic, and good for humans, and also good for little humans. This project here is actually designed for children as part of this park here. The history of Frick Park goes back about 100 years, but basically 1,000 acres were deeded by Henry Clay Frick to his daughter, and his daughter had the foresight to say, I want for this to be a park that Pittsburghers can utilize and enjoy. And sure enough, that's how it is even 100 years later. Right now we're standing on the site of what was an environmental center built in the 1980s. And that was cutting edge back then, but unfortunately it had a fire and burned down in the early 2000s. So about 10 years later, the idea to rebuild, to have it be an environmental center made a lot of sense. But not just any environmental center, this project also wanted to pursue the Living Building Challenge certification, so much more ambitious than normal. And what was noteworthy is that this is a City of Pittsburgh public parks building. So this is really a showpiece of sorts for the entire park system. So right now we're on the 3rd floor, and just like Phipps, where we just were, it's also 3 levels. You come in at the top, you can go out at the bottom, namely because we're on a hillside right now. Just like at Phipps, we're on a south-facing hillside that lets the sun shine in. So you have that high sun from the summer that you can block, the low sun in the winter that you want. So you have window shading, so a lot of views to the south, and the ability to open up those windows, get air in if you'd like. Unlike Phipps, this one here actually has operable windows. So you can actually open them without having computers involved. But this is something that they work on. There's also, within this, you see I'm standing in a corridor here. You have the outside with a native landscape. You also have a celebration of rainwater. When it rains here, this rain isn't something that's meant to just be made to disappear. Rain is actually celebrated. You actually have an edge of the building that's meant to have the water fall like a veil. That was part of the concept. Meanwhile, the water makes its way around the building, down the hillside, into ultimately the creek, and then ultimately the river. But as that water is going through the site, it actually gets celebrated in the form of a rain garden, which you're able to see. It's beautiful when it's dry because it's been sculpted and made with stone materials, but it's beautiful when it's wet and there's water running down. So it's a perfect way to actually control that water and celebrate it. In the meantime, you have native and indigenous species all around the park here. The energy is just like with the Phipps project. The way that you get to net zero energy or net positive energy, which means that you're creating more energy than you're using, is by making a very tight building that's very insulated. Even though you've got a lot of glass, you still have a very tight building that's very efficient. But then when you get to a certain level where you can't reduce the energy use anymore, that's when you start creating the energy. And so that's what the photovoltaics are about. In this particular case, the photovoltaic panels are covering the parking. And that's a really good way to actually provide shading for people who park, capture the sunlight that would otherwise be hitting the ground anyway. And those solar panels actually create a way to capture stormwater. So that stormwater comes and hits those panels, and it gets captured and stored underground. And then that water gets used to flush toilets and things like that. So there's actually very little need for any kind of potable water that you would get that's municipally treated. They're able to use the stormwater on site for their irrigation needs and their toilet needs. And then thirdly, you've got this healthy interior environment where you've got low toxic finishes. You notice that the flooring here is concrete. It's brushed concrete, so you don't have to worry about polishes and waxes and floor tile and adhesives and things like that. The wood is a naturally prominent material here. It's beautiful for us because it evokes feelings of biophilia for us, but it's actually tactile, it's very useful, and it's a beautiful thing that we recognize. In addition to that, you have some steel. So that's providing the actual structure for the building. So it's holding up the building. So there's an element of honest expression. We're able to see how the building is built between the concrete and the steel and the wood and the glass. And the other thing that you're able to see is that there are natural forms here. What these strings out here are doing is blocking, keeping birds from flying in, while at the same time for us, evoking biophilic and natural and organic forms that are reassuring to us. When you add that up with the artworks that are around here, as well as like the little doors for the little ones among us and things like that, what you have is a really beautiful space that's really fun to hang out in and learn in, because this is an education center. But since it's part of a public park, anyone can come in and visit it for free. So it's really well organized. You've got the public areas and classrooms up here. On the second floor, you've got the offices. And then on the ground floor, you have storage and the equipment that actually powers the building. So when you come in, you can go through the inside, but at the same time, outside is where the real treat is as well. So you've got the stormwater catchment, you've got the photovoltaic panels that are capturing the sunlight, you've got all these native and drought-tolerant plantings, and you've got natural trails. So you're able to go around and walk and hike, and stop in here if you need to get a drink of water or use the restroom. But in general, this is kind of meant to be a way station on the outside as you're going through the park, which is exactly what was the strong conception of this project in the first place. So an ambitious project, whereas Phipps was about 25,000 square feet, this project here is about 17,000 square feet, so a little bit smaller, but again, it has more than enough energy to actually be net positive, create more energy than it uses.
Hi, my name is Patricia Cully. I'm an associate principal with Bolin Sywinski Jackson here at the Frick Environmental Center. The Frick Environmental Center is a joint venture between the City of Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy, and it is very much an ambitious project with regard to sustainability. Bolin Sywinski Jackson was awarded the project in 2006, and it was very much a collaborative effort with both the Parks Conservancy, the City of Pittsburgh, our landscape architect, LaQuatra Bonsi, and the larger consultant team, including evolveEA. The sustainability ambitions were high from the outset, and they very much aligned with the Parks Conservancy's efforts with environmental education. Early on in the process, the Parks Conservancy wanted to evaluate different sustainability certifications, which included sites, LEED, and Living Building Challenge. Although Living Building Challenge, the full certification, wasn't part of the initial concept, there was ambition to potentially pursue it, but really kind of look into it and see how it aligned with the philosophy of the Parks Conservancy. Once the design team and the owner really started to engage with Living Building Challenge, we felt that there was so much alignment and philosophy with regard to connecting with nature, really understanding how the built environment and the natural environment coincide and how they can coexist. The Living Building Challenge very much aligns with the philosophy of environmental education and this idea of regenerating the parks system from a cycle of deterioration to a cycle of stewardship. That was one of the primary goals of the Parks Conservancy when it was initially created, and that very much aligns as well with Living Building Challenge and the concepts and the programs of the Frick Environmental Center. There was a very robust community engagement process in advance of designing the Frick Environmental Center. The Parks Conservancy led visioning sessions with community members and primary stakeholders with over 1,000 individuals to understand their aspirations and vision for this project. That visioning process was a 10-year-long effort to come up with what is now this amazing public amenity with the Frick Environmental Center. The community engagement both started with the visioning, but continued on through the design and construction process, where we constantly provided feedback and had the public come do site tours during the construction of the project. So they very much were engaged with how this building came about. And it very much shows some of the design elements that came directly out of the visioning include the amphitheater on the west side of the building, as well as the reimagining of the historic fountain. The Frick Environmental Center is a 3-story building that's situated within the hillside of the larger park. The massing of the building is very intentionally proportioned so that along the north facade, you see a very low profile. It feels as if it's a 1-story building. And as you wrap around the back toward the south facade, as the building meanders down the hillside, the full 3-story facade opens up. What this design feature does is when you're along the north, you engage within the tree canopy. You have a very direct connection with the outdoor environment along the north facade. As you wrap around the south facade and walk along the balcony, it's a different engagement with the outdoors. You're actually within the tree canopy and overlooking the landscape. Along the south facade, there is a balcony located at the upper level, and there is a biophilic aspect of that balcony. The grating of the balcony is intentionally open so that you can see through it and you can see beyond it. And this is a biophilic design element in that it heightens your relationship with nature. Because you're no longer on solid ground, you sort of see through this grating, you see beyond it, you are more aware of your surroundings, and that's very intentional. When you're at the Frick Environmental Center, you want to have a different relationship with nature. You want to be able to engage with it in a heightened way. You don't want to be standing on the balcony with your cell phone. You want to understand your environment. And so by having this balcony grating open, it very much sort of manipulates your understanding of your surroundings and makes you much more aware. The window wall along the south facade has floor-to-ceiling glazing to let in a lot of light along the south facade and into the classrooms that are adjacent to it. The windows themselves vary in width, allowing the light to pepper through in a variegated way. This design element replicates how light passes through a forest. Adjacent to the gallery along the north facade of the building, there are two tower masses, one for the elevator and one for the stair tower. These masses were created with a poured concrete structure, and they're clad in ground face block. And they're intentionally large masses to ground the building into the hillside. The ground face block is peppered with this salvaged curbstone. This is curbstone that the city of Pittsburgh had in their yard, and they weren't doing anything with it. And the design team thought, wouldn't it be great to incorporate some of these salvaged elements into the design of these two towers? And the masons did an incredible job. It's really a testament to their skill in their trade of being able to create this beautiful constellation of salvaged curbstone, limestone curbstone, throughout the ground face blocks of these two prominent towers on the north facade of the Frick Environmental Center.
So if you ever get the chance, come to Frick Park and visit the Frick Environmental Center.